There's something out there. I'm coming with you.
You can't.
I'm trying to protect you.
Protect me from what? It's time.
Welcome to Mitchoy Chats. I'm Michael J. Foy.
I am Frank Mitchell.
I'm Mike DiGioia.
And tonight, we become, not Predator, Prey. Discussing Prey 2022.
We become Prey discussing Prey. That is... I'm terrified now.
I tried to make it nonsensical and scary.
All right. Well, wonderful. Well, you know what makes me feel safe is going to MitchoyChats.com and listening to all our old episodes and making sure that we're all caught up with the nonsense that is Mitchoy Chats. But, can I ask you boys, because I feel like right out of the gate here, I feel like you guys, more than most people I know, are vehement, I would say, Predator fans. Yes. So hearing that there was a prequel to Predator coming out, what were your kind of initial reactions? Were you excited? Were you cautiously excited? What was going on?
Any big movie that comes out, I don't care whether it's Predator, Alien, a Marvel, a DC, a Star Trek, a Star Wars, any big budget movie that comes out, there's always like a friendly little skepticism there. Because most of the time, like, I don't walk out of all these movies, I'm like, that was terrible, terrible, terrible. But a lot of times they're just okay. A lot of times they have cool concepts, and this moment was cool. And it's such a very, like, we'll see kind of situation when it comes to, like, big budget movies. And I think that's kind of just the name of the game. And I even had a conversation with my brother about that because, you know, he was like, I think he was kind of complaining about this happening in this movie. And I'm like, you got to keep in mind, you're watching corporate movies here. Like,
very much.
You know, very, very seldom is that movie going to hit all the marks. And there's always going to be compromise. There's always a handful of cooks in the kitchen. And
it is owned by Disney now.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, there's so many factors involved with like big budget movies, and you're playing to a mass audience. Like, it's one of those types of things where it's like, okay, we're going to do this, but make sure at this point this happens, make sure at that point this happens, and make sure we do. You know what I mean? Like, that's always going to be the case with movies like this. So when they announced it, it's like at this point we had Predator 2, we had Predators, we had The Predator, and they were all just, you know, whatever. Predator 2 will always hold a bit of a nostalgic place. Like, I don't love Predator 2. I prefer the first half of the movie. But just because of nostalgia, like, I can enjoy that movie and it had cool concepts. But, you know, everything after that was just like, you know, whether it's Predator or something else. So when they announced this, I was like, okay, we'll see. Because I know it can be done. But I know a lot of the times it's not really done. And that's kind of where I was with it, essentially. It's like, all right, we'll see.
Gotcha. I feel like that's kind of where I was as well when I heard about it. And then I heard the director that was involved, and I was like, all right, cool, because he knows how to do these. Because he did 10 Cloverfield Lane, Dan Trachtenberg, and he's the director of Prey. And for anyone listening and doesn't know, but he really did manage to come into the world of Cloverfield, which I know is not like a franchise or anything like that. That's very close to my heart, or really anyone's hearts, honestly. But to come into something like this is a sequel to Cloverfield, it's coming from a different direction, and to see it unfold as it did, I was like, this guy clearly knows tension and clearly knows how to come into an established franchise, but still be able to make his own mark. And that was something from 10 Cloverfield Lane that I'm like, he really did manage to make both of those statements when he was making that movie. So I was excited to see what he would be able to do with Prey or Predator. Mike Foy, how did you feel about it?
I gotta rewind the clock a little here. So, I grew up watching the original Predator and the Alien franchise. So when I first started watching those movies, there was only the original Alien trilogy, and there were 2 Predator films. And at that time, growing up in the the early '90s, me and my buddy Dan, we always used to play any chance we got, which was very rare. I think it only maybe happened twice. Able to rent the Alien versus Predator video game. So like the concept of Alien versus Predator was such like a fun idea, and it's teased so beautifully at the end of Predator 2. And
they see a skull in the trophy room or whatever it is at the end, right?
Yeah.
They see a big skull of one of the aliens.
Yeah, it's a giant xenomorph skull amongst all these other skulls.
Yeah.
Predator 2 is like it's a strange movie, and it's a weird mixed bag, but like it's a pretty fun movie. And it does a lot of interesting things with the Predator, and it does expand the universe of like what these aliens are in a way that that is, I mean, obviously we're spoiling these movies, but like at the end of that movie, Danny Glover of all people is able to defeat a Predator, which is oddly believable in the movie, but is somehow oddly maybe not believable, because even though Danny Glover was a lot younger, he was always playing older and always felt older. So I think that was a strange sort of casting choice, but I don't think he's bad in the movie. I think the movie's just a little wonky. But at the end of the movie, he defeats this Predator, and all of these other Predators come out. And it's an interesting sequence, because you're seeing all these different looking Predators, and they're all different ages, and they're sort of just like, all right, motherfucker, you killed one of us. Good on you. All right, here, they throw him a little prize, and they're like, all right, see you later. Hope you get out of here.
You win.
I really appreciated that, like, they sort of respected the fact that it was like, yeah, you beat us.
Like they respect the game. They respect the hunt.
Yes.
They respect the ability to kill, which is like, it's just so interesting.
Absolutely. And I felt like that movie, although as wonky as it was, it ultimately does a lot of cool things with the Predator mythology. The issue going forward is that there was comic book series that came out afterward, which was all, Alien versus Predator and sort of expanding those ideas. And this started to take both the Alien and Predator franchises in like a much more commercialized, just like versus mentality. It was, and obviously we eventually got those movies, and I was so looking forward to Alien versus Predator, and I was like, I don't know if it's going to be like, I don't think it's going to be great, but I think it's going to be really fun. And I remember I was working this miserable job, and it was like a Friday night, and I was like, I'm going to see Alien versus Predator tonight. And I walked out of that movie, and I was like, what the fuck did I just watch? I was like, I couldn't believe how badly they had just completely squandered all of the mythology and world building that had been done prior. They just decided that, no, this is how it's going to be, and we're going to make these little changes, but it completely fucks up everything you've seen before. It wasn't good. And they made a sequel to that, which was, in some ways, kind of better, but also not good. Like, both of those movies ultimately just made me want to go back and watch the original Predator or watch Alien or Aliens. So, like, I was getting this, terrible history now with these movies where I'm like, I'm not liking where this is going. Alien Resurrection is, like, not very good. It's okay. The director's cut's a little bit better. Alien 3 is a total mixed bag. There's 2 cuts of that movie. I kind of like things about both cuts. I don't know. David Fincher completely disowned it. So, like, it's not like these franchises were, like, in the best of shape necessarily or whatever, but the original Predator is such an incredible movie, and it is one of the rare movies that I give a 5-star to. It's not technically perfect, so to speak, but like when you really look at the pantheon of filmmaking, like nothing is really technically perfect. There's always something where you're like, oh yeah, they kind of, yeah, there's a little something about that, or there's a little something here, but the whole point is that how does the package come together? And a movie like Jaws, a movie like Aliens, like especially the special edition, a movie like Predator, like there's certain movies that you're just like, God damn it, how the fuck did they make something this good? Like it's so hard to make a movie. Yeah. And to make a movie like they did with Predator in the jungle, like all these conditions, they had to recast to get Van Damme out of there playing some weird looking in Predator, redesign the whole fucking thing. Like that movie should not have worked, and it does. And that is to me is the beauty of true movie magic, is that you're really capturing something. And there are certain movies that you watch and you're like, it doesn't matter, like a Jaws, right? It's almost going to be 50 years old, and this is a movie that like you watch it and it still feels like magical. You know, like it's incredible that Back to the Future is 35 years old, and it still feels, there's something about it, like, and I feel like Predator 2 doesn't really have that. You can feel it when you watch a movie, and you're like, oh, this is cool. This kind of works, or these pieces are coming together. This is a pretty good movie, but it doesn't have that spark.
I'm just going to say spark. I feel like that's the appropriate word for it. I was going to say it's lightning in a bottle. I feel like movies like Back to the Future and Predator, it's just these crazy ideas that you're like, you know what, that is actually fantastic. Because even when I heard about the premise for Prey, and when they were like, yeah, it's in the 1700s, I'm like, that's a cool idea to handicap the Predator. Because this is apparently, according to Dan Trachtenberg, this is the Predator's first visit to Earth.
Right.
Like, and I going into the movie knowing that is, I think, a valuable piece of information, because seeing him interact with things is interesting. Like, because initially, if I were watching a movie, like, and getting into Prey a little bit, like, there are moments where you see a cloaked predator, like, skinning a snake and things like that. And you're like, there's a point where you're like, well, who cares? But the other part of it is, like, if this is their first visit to Earth, this is their first time interacting with any of these beings. So they, as the Predator, don't know what to expect. So it was interesting seeing the Predator interact with everything around them and seeing them, kind of doing what they do.
Yeah.
But
yeah, definitely. I mean, that's always been an interesting thing about the Predator, is like how it's choosing its prey, and how I mean, it is an amazing concept in that first movie when he goes like, "Oh, he didn't shoot you because you're not armed." Like, it's just like there's no sport. Like it's such an incredible moment where you're like, "Oh my God!" You're starting to realize how this thing thinks. And I really enjoyed how in Prey they found a lot of very interesting ways to play on that concept. I think Prey gets to its weakest moments when it reiterates certain lines word for word from Predator. You just didn't have to do that. But one of the things I think it did strongest was the moment where she falls into the muddy bog. And she's struggling to get herself out, and it's a tense sequence, and you're like, all right, it's really cool because you're seeing how calm she can be under this really stressful situation. She is sinking, and she knows that if she panics, she's going to fucking submerge, and she's done. So like, she is working so meticulously and keeping her breath and keeping her head in a certain way to stay above that mud. And then she gets herself out and she pulls herself up against the branches, and you're like, it looks just like Arnold in the first Predator. And I was like, this is cool, but I really hope it doesn't do what I think it's about to do. And then the movie did something I did not expect. It actually Yes, it didn't do what I thought it was going to do. I was like, this is impressive, because then another scene later or earlier, you learned about how there's a medicine that reduces like the temperature of the blood. And I was like, motherfucker, that is a brilliant way to subvert, and play upon it in the scene,
yes,
and then have that log come back around at the end. Like, it was like, okay, I see what you're doing, and I appreciate that.
Right? Like, it was so funny. Like, right when that happened, I'm sitting on the couch next to Jen, and I'm ready to lean over and be like, so in the original Predator, Arnold Schwarzenegger is covered in mud at one point. And I'm like, and it's so funny because I'm like, it ends and she washes herself off, and I'm like, don't even bother, Frank. Don't even worry about it. But it's just so funny, like when you guys were immediately like, I was waiting, and I'm like, I was too.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of my favorite aspects of the movie. When that, not only did that never come into play the way you thought it would, but I even think, and this is a very rare thing that a prequel coming out so long after the original does, it almost even added an extra effectiveness to that sequence in the first Predator movie.
Yeah.
And it almost helps make for a really cool like double feature to watch Prey and then Predator. Because I was very happy that never did. Because I was expecting the Predator to show up while she was against the tree like that, covered in mud.
100%, because they show you that the Predator is on her trail, and he's not that far behind her. So there is a tension in the scene where you're like, oh my God, not only is she going to die, obviously she can't get out of there, but this thing is right behind her. It's only a matter of it turning the right direction. So I just thought that was very effective, because then she goes and starts washing the mud off, and then the encounter happens. It's just the movie was. It was interesting to see how they really made an effort to find ways to do something that was a little different. It was similar, but even the design of the Predator helmet.
It's a skull. It's a skull.
Yeah, but seeing how it's something where how the Predator always has been very tribal. But technological, that felt like a genuine earlier version of the Mask. It was they took a skull and they took their technology and just built it into bone. Yeah. That was just a cool idea. Because at first I'm like, is that a mask or is this some sort of other Predator? And I was like, I think it's a mask. And then when he comes and knocks that thing off its face, I was like, oh, that's badass.
Very cool. And I really like too how they I really enjoyed how they leaned into that idea of, finding the right opponent, doing it as sport. And I like when he landed, he deals with 3 specific animals in this movie, and each one is a predator on Earth. And he deals with they each have an increasing difficulty level for him. And
I didn't even notice that. And then when you said it, I'm like, holy shit, you're right.
When he landed, the rattlesnake was no problem. The wolf gave him a little bit more of an issue, and then the bear was obviously much more of a fight. And that was
such a cool sequence.
Oh my God!
Awesome.
Yes,
he's like, what the hell is this thing? And then they just wrestling, and I love that bear fucking knocked him down. It was
for real.
It was great.
I love
the Predator's so satisfying. It's just some of those hits. You're like, oh my God, this is brutal.
It was brutal.
Really cool. It was really, really cool to see. And so I really liked that aspect of that increasing difficulty. And
definitely.
That was such a cool element until he got to all the tribesmen and everything. And then it became a different kind of fight. And they did a really, and this is something that, not just this movie, but this is something that action movies in general have started to really do better than even older movies, is a sense of choreography with your sequences, with your action sequences. There's a purpose, there's a method behind, there's a narrative behind the action sequence.
why they're happening and whatnot.
Yeah, and there's care that's put into it, like the way a character moves, the way and that's a big thing they're doing now with these, like whether it's Predator or Michael Myers, all these movies coming back like into the fold. You see these updated versions of these characters. You almost see a more extreme version of these characters, like something you would see like, in the earlier movies, but they just didn't have like, I guess that same, I don't want to say care, but like that sense of choreography. It just wasn't really there a lot of the times. They were still really cool sequences, but like the way they construct an action sequence now is really cool to watch. And they did a lot of that in this movie. Like the way the Predator moves, uses different gadgets, the way the tribesmen move, like when they're fighting him, whether it was with the bear or, so that was a really awesome, that was just really cool to see, like,
Agreed.
A Predator movie.
Honestly, I enjoyed seeing him as a more primitive Predator. He seemed like even his main weapon, the bolts, they were mainly, it was basically like an electromagnetic crossbow. Yeah, almost. Like, so it's just so cool that like he has the heat vision, he has like a bomb that he can leave and will explode, like in the original, like in the first one, but he also has only a bow staff with a sword and a thing that produces a shield. Like, so there's a lot of it that's like he is advanced, but he is also still sort of tribal and still sort of primitive. So seeing his weapons like that fighting against people who weren't necessarily more advanced than him, or were like slightly more advanced than him. I thought it was such a cool handicap to give the Predator of like, well, we're not seeing him like when he fought Arnold, where he has like lasers and fucking, arm cannons and whatnot. He's, a little bit more primitive than that. I thought it was really cool to see.
Oh, very cool. No, that was an awesome aspect of it. Cause again, they're definitely more advanced, but it's still 300 years prior for them also. Precisely.
And being the first Earth visit, you're like, what am I coming up against?
Yeah. I gotta say though, I genuinely enjoyed this movie. Like any like little flaws or whatnot aside, I dug the fuck out of this movie. I will say this though, I do have like one of my gripes with the movie. I wish it had a little bit more of like, I'm going to say apocalypto, just because something like, whether it's apocalypto or even when you look at something like Game of Thrones, you see a real grit and realism to like the way those are filmed. I felt this movie had a little bit, like this is a very subjective thing you could say too, but like I felt like there was a little bit too much of a polish to the movie. Like it didn't have like, I almost wish it had more of a gritty feeling like a Game of Thrones or like an Apocalypto type of situation. Even like, and I thought the main actress, I thought she was really good. But it was also one of those
mini April Ludgate.
What was it?
I said mini April Ludgate.
April Ludgate. Am I not?
I'm sorry. That is what is her actual name? Aubrey Plaza.
What's that from?
Oh, you're Aubrey Plaza. You don't know her?
No, I know her, but what's the?
I'm sorry. April Ludgate is from Parks and Rec.
Oh, okay. I never actually watched Parks and Rec.
Well, that's it. You're a terrible person, A and B.
I was going to say I know her from Legion, and she was good on that.
Oh, she is very, very good. She's been in a handful of movies too that have been quirky and odd. And she was the mother in the remake of Child Play as well.
Okay.
Well, that was Aubrey Plaza, right? She was in Child's Play.
She was.
Okay. So yes. Yeah, she was.
Wow, I really deviated the whole podcast with that. I'm really sorry. I thought that would have been, I threw that out and you guys would have laughed real quick and that would have been it. But no, it's full on like, who is that? Oh yeah, I know her from this weird movie. I know her from that weird appearance. All right, whatever, Frank. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good.
Please continue. I'm sorry.
So she was really good in the movie. I liked it. I liked her a lot in the movie. It felt a little too much, though, and I have a problem. This is a big problem with a lot of movies. I had a massive problem with this in Jurassic World. Jurassic World Dominion was brutal with this. This is not as bad as Jurassic World Dominion.
No, it's not.
No, I'm just fucking yeah, this. A little too clean, and like you could tell she was a very pretty girl, obviously. I felt like movies like this also, I like to see the main character go through hell. Like, I like to see the main character banged up a little bit. I like to see, that kind of missed a little bit of this. Like, it was almost like she was too, like, again, she was awesome in the movie. Like I'm not taking that. That's one of the reasons why it didn't bother me as much, because she did such a great job. But, I could have gone for a little bit of a dirtier look with everybody, like just a dirtier look, like within the whole entire movie.
Sure.
So that was kind of like, that was one of my bigger, again, like when I say big complaint, it wasn't even really a big complaint, because I feel like my thought would be, if that's your big complaint, that you didn't have a whole lot of complaints with the movie. Exactly. That's pretty much what I enjoyed the movie so much for so many, like all these aspects we're talking about, that it didn't detract from my enjoyment at all. Honestly, like I felt like overall, like I really enjoyed watching it. I did feel like there were points that it felt like it was a bit of a slow burn, but at the same token, I feel like you were given action fairly consistently throughout the movie, so it kept you interested and whatnot. And I feel like overall, like there was a part of me that I'm like, oh, I would have appreciated a better Predator reveal initially, but then in looking back at it, the reveal is when you see the skull mask. When you see them cloaked, it's like, who cares? You know the Predator's around. You know it's a Predator sequel. You know the Predator's going to be there. So you don't need necessarily a welcoming image necessarily of the Predator. But I did feel like
you have that whole first movie.
Exactly. Well, precisely. But the other part of me is like, you see that reveal of them with the skull mask, and when you see the skull mask, you're like, oh, okay, that's the reveal. Like, that's the moment you're like, oh, there they are. Like, so it was a cool uncovering of what the Predator looks like, and the sort of reiteration of the idea of that this isn't the Predator from the Arnold, iteration, where they're a little bit more advanced and they have some more technology. This is them and their first time checking the place out, and they don't really know what to expect, so this is what they look like. And I appreciated the similarities between the Predator and the main girl. I forget her name and call her the girl. She's probably a woman at this point. I don't know. But either way, the Predator's dreadlocks, or whatever they whatever you want to call them, they seemed a lot thinner, and it seemed to mimic the girl's hair as well. She never wore her hair back or drawn away from her face. It was always down the same way the Predator was, just like, that back sort of, I'm still checking the place out, I don't really know what to expect sort of, devil may care look. But it all really worked for that sense of the hair and whatnot, and I feel like they were both very, very much attuned to the environment and trying to figure out what the next step is going to be in what they were going to do. I felt like they had a lot of similar movements and stuff like that. I thought it was interesting to see how they both worked in the universe, you know what I mean? No, 100%. That's the thing. I liked her whole journey through this. And I liked too how, like, even though she was trying to prove herself, she still did start off as a very skilled, like, tracker, a very skilled fighter. And I appreciated that. You know what I mean? I liked how it gave her like more of that fighting chance instead of her like not being good at anything and just all of a sudden she's taken out a Predator. You can listen. I'm sure you can argue. Yeah, it wasn't out of nowhere. Yeah, I mean, she clearly was like, she was strong enough, and you saw her kind of come through things and get over certain things. You're like, all right, no, this is a character that I could see doing something like this and being successful at it, not being like, all right, this is a moment of like pandering to the Go Girl audience or whatever. Like, this is you looked real, and Yeah, I mean, there was definitely you could still make the argument though, like towards the end when they were fighting, there's probably a handful of times where that predator would have clipped her in a heartbeat. So you can make that argument, but
I mean, I can definitely give you that. I feel like 90%, there's a good chance of 90% of the time arguments can be cut that way. But
it's also one of those things too, where it was kind of filmed and choreographed so well that it was hard for me to let it be a movie, let it do its thing, and you know what I mean. There was still and I like the way too. I like the way her dog was incorporated into not just with the predator towards the end, but how the dog was incorporated as an actual companion.
At so many points in this movie, I'm like, if you kill this fucking dog, I'm shutting this fucking movie off, and I'm writing an angry letter, and that's going to be it.
yeah. So I liked how the dog played a big part in, even luring the bear away, doing stuff like that. And
did you feel the moment where the dog comes back around, where you just feel the dog going, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, and all the bear comes right behind him, be like, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god, oh god.
But that was just super cool how they incorporated that in there. They had a new element to her combat and the resources she had, and I liked how they established the understanding she had with the dog in the beginning. Even when I don't know if it was her mother, grandmother, where she was you trained him well, or he understand something like that. There was it was established early on that there was it wasn't an empty companionship. There was an actual purpose behind it. And
yeah, she says something he's smart or something like that.
Yeah, and it's cool to see obviously working with dogs a lot. I mean, that's always cool stuff for me to see, because that's most of what dogs like that don't get in domesticated homes. They don't have a, what I mean? They don't have a purpose. They don't have a job. And to see that in a movie, to see that purpose, to see that job, especially in a movie like this, is really cool.
Yeah. That was one of the things I found most interesting about the movie, was the fact that there's been so many movies that, it feels like you're just trying to have, a female as the lead. This movie felt more natural. It felt like you're telling a story, and that this was the character who was the lead, and it's her and her dog, and she's trying to, find her place as a warrior. And it felt much more natural and organic, despite the fact that I do agree that there's aspects of the movie that feel a little too polished at times. And I do think some of the action in the third act, I kind of agree. It's almost like there's moments where you're the predator would have got her here, or maybe he would have acted sooner. I think some of that can be chopped up to literally the editing. I think you could have made some of those pieces a little tighter, and maybe dropped a little bit of the slow-mo that kind of happened in some of those moments. Yeah. And I think it would have just felt oh, boom, she came around and got him, or whatever. Yeah. But most of but I do agree though that the choreographing is really well done, and the thought process behind how she has to set up this trap at the end, she truly had to be a more cunning warrior. Yeah. And I love the escalation that the predator is facing, all these different types of obviously warriors and predators of planet Earth. Mm-hmm. But when he's dealing with the men are obviously much more just head-on, fights. And it's interesting that it's it took her to be the one who was no, you got to sit back, and you got to try this, and you got to try that. You got to think outside the box, and not just constantly lead with your bow and arrow, or constantly just be brash. And you see how the predator is kind of brash in certain situations, with the bear. He's just fuck you, I'll take you on. And then he kind of gets his ass kicked for a second, and you're oh, all right. So he's obviously learning. He doesn't know what a bear is. He's just this is a giant fucking beast. Let's go.
Right, he just sees it. He's let's fucking go, bro.
And it is interesting though to see him deal with the wild wolf, and then to see him deal with this dog who is obviously so well trained and so smart, and like her and this dog work so well together. And I had a moment early in the movie where like the two of them are like walking out together, and I'm like, oh, this movie is basically just a girl and her dog.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm totally fine with
detriment.
this.
Like, right?
Not at all.
To a detriment. Like, it's just
not at all.
I'm down for a movie about a girl and her dog. Let's do it.
The way that the structure of this movie is, like, she keeps finding herself in these situations where you're like, okay, how could she seriously survive this? And then you're like, okay, actually, that kind of makes sense. You have all these other characters that keep kind of coming in and coming out. There are moments where she doesn't have a weapon and she's like running away, and like the predator is like at times is still kind of tracking her. Is like, you might be a threat. You might have a weapon. He's like, it's interesting how, he's kind of constantly monitoring that. Is like, is this thing attacking me? Is it not attacking me?
Honestly, in that moment where she's caught in the where she's caught in the bear trap, and the predator is cloaked, and he is pulling the chain and realizing she's caught in the bear trap, and he sees the trappers coming up, and he's like, no, let me stand back and see what happens. Like. It's very interesting seeing how he surveys situations, because I feel like that's part of it as well. He looks at it and he's like, all right, well, you're not a threat because you're trapped right now, so how much of a threat could you be? Let's see what happens here. And then he goes to the trappers, and when that whole sequence plays out, but I feel like so much of it is interesting seeing how he looks at a situation and surveys the threats and decides what is the worst threat, what is the more prevalent threat, what is the threat that's going to ultimately hurt me that I'm going to have to deal with. Yeah. It was interesting on that level too.
Yeah, and always looking for like the biggest thrill. Like, I mean, I obviously have said it like 3 times now. Like, just when he attacks that bear, he's just like, "Let's go, motherfucker!" Like, he's just like he's like, these things truly live to hunt. And like, I mean, one of the only things that I think we got gypped as an audience on in the original Predator is the moment where Billy is standing on top of that log and he cuts his chest with that blade. I wanted, like, give me like a 2-minute just like bare knuckle fucking fight between Billy and the Predator, because you know that he's going to lose. But like, I wanted you to just see, because that guy is just like, he's seething like the whole time. You're like, this motherfucker is wild. He is on point. He is tracking this thing. He knows what's up. And I just like, that's one sequence I was like, I kind of want that. And he is like Native American to some, either fully or to some extent. So it is kind of cool to like have this new Predator movie bring it back to seeing these Comanches and how badass they were, like fucking just, kicking ass and taking names. But this movie really did feel, because of there's several things with regards to the Predator. I liked how they mixed elements of the original Predator and Predator 2. Like, they kind of have that nod to where she gets him to cut off his own arm. I thought that was a brilliant move. Just using getting him to use his own weapons and like against himself. But again, like, that's what you have to do as a cunning warrior. You're not more powerful than this thing. You have to find ways to get him to use his own body weight against himself. So I thought that, like, those were like really fun things, and some of the weapons were kind of either modifications of things from the first one or the second one in particular. The third movie, Predators, I don't think was a terrible idea, and there's the Predators that are in the movie I think are cool. The Predator dogs were cool, but like, it feels too much like the first one. You just have this ragtag group of strangers, and then my whole Topher Grace being the sexual predator thing was just it just I get the point of it, I get it, but it just didn't work for that movie. It just didn't. So like that movie, I mean, having like Robert Rodriguez come in, I think was a good idea. Like, it's not a terrible movie, and I think if you're a fan of like Predator movies, I do think it's a much better route to go than getting involved in like Alien versus Predator, because those movies I think just didn't do the mythology of either franchise justice. But Predators is like, okay, The Predator was just like, I don't know what happened here. I don't know what kind of crack pipe that Shane Black was smoking, but the dude usually writes really awesome movies and has directed some really cool fucking movies, and has been in some really cool fucking movies. But The Predator had some interesting ideas, but that movie was just such a ridiculous hot mess. And it was so unfortunate. And like, honestly, when I heard about this movie, I had no interest. I heard, oh, you're going to make a movie called Prey. I was like, all right, I guess you're going to make it, so I guess I'll see it. But I honestly I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to really give a shit because, you know, you waited forever for Predators, and it was all right. It was pretty good. Not great. It doesn't have a lot of rewatchability, but if it's on TV when I'm at my parents' house, it's like, all right, we can watch this. You know, it's just kind of there. The Predator is kind of like the same thing, but it's, you know, like a level or two below that. This really did feel like a real Predator 3. It has way more connective tissue to the original Predator and to Predator 2, specifically with that pistol. I thought that was a really fun and interesting thing to throw in there. And like how the actual Predator acquires it, don't know. I mean, this movie sort of hints at the end that there's going to be more Predators now coming to Earth. But I don't know. I really appreciated what this movie did. And it is such a hard thing to try to make an effective sequel. This is now like the 5th direct sequel in the Predator franchise. It's now like the 7th overall Predator movie if you include the Alien versus Predator films. Like,
which
you know, it should. Yeah, you should. There's going to be a quiz, but it's like the Halloween movie.
As well as we did.
It's like the Halloween movies. I mean, you know, you have so many Halloween films, so many of them you can kind of mix and match which ones you want to watch together because the franchise is so fucking splintered. And it was incredible to see Halloween Returns in 2018 and be like, wow, you could still actually make a good Michael Myers movie? Like, how is this possible? How is he even remotely scary anymore? Like, it can be done if you have the right person behind the project and, like, a interesting enough idea and, like, and just, like, it's really amazing to see this movie, and I really enjoyed Prey. It's not my favorite Predator movie, but, like, it's one that I'm like, again, it really feels like a worthy successor. And I am curious to see if they make a sequel to this and, you know, if they jump time, if there's something it's going to be like a direct thing. But they did allude to it, so I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, no, same here. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, nothing's going to... the grit, look, feel, and nostalgia of the original, and obviously the quality of it, it's always going to be hard to topple that, especially in my eyes. Right. You know? So the first one is absolutely 100% always going to be number one. This is obviously the second best, but that's also, I want to clarify too, because calling this the second best is an empty compliment in a way, because it wasn't really difficult to get better than all the stuff that came before this one. But sure. This movie really is better than just that. This movie is better than just being the best since the original. Like, it really holds its own in everything we just talked about. And it honestly, like, I initially heard the title, so I initially heard, like, the description for the movie and whatever, and I was like, all right, it's definitely a more interesting idea than what's been done the last several Predator sequels, and I like to, you know, okay, we're going to make a prequel, we'll try something different, but this movie owned its title. It wasn't just, like, a clever play on Predator. Like, when you watch Predator, you were watching a movie of elite, like, military men who are now, like, or, you know, you're watching guys who are just, like, they are predators, and not in the Topher Grace way. Like, they're real fucking killers, and that's what I mean with that one moment with Billy, is, like, I just wanted to see him go, like, head-to-head with a predator for a minute. That would have been cool. But, like, these
everyone in the movie is a predator, with the exception of Anna, who's with them, who is obviously just sort of like along for the ride on this crazy thing. So everyone fits that title. That title is like perfect. And this movie, she is a predator, but she's also prey, and like legitimately. And the way that is woven through her journey across this story, like she's going back and forth between hunting this thing and being hunted, and also having those moments where it's like, I gotta drop my weapon, like I literally have to, either become the prey accidentally, like with the bear trap, or like I purposely gotten rid of my weapons to try to like get out of this. Like, it's just, I don't know. I really appreciated the fact that it wasn't, because there's so many of these, obviously, cookie cutter movies where it's like, we just have the clever title, we have the clever whatever, and they don't really do much with it, or it doesn't amount to much, or it feels hollow. I do agree with you that in a sense it is, unfortunately, kind of an empty comment to say that this is the best Predator sequel. I don't know if I personally... it might be maybe a little bit more rewatchable than Predator 2, but I definitely have nostalgia for that movie. But that movie is also really like wacky in a such a 90s way that just doesn't exist now. Like, it's such a weird movie, but it's also really fun. And the fact that you have Kevin Peter Hall playing the Predator in the first one and the second one is pretty fantastic. The Predator design in Predator 2 is awesome. And the weapons like scaling of that movie is really, really fun. I really do love that whole sequence in the freezer. Like, it's just, you realize, like, oh my god, the Predator is just cycling through visions. It's like, these humans are fucking toast. Like, there's so many fun things in that. So I think that, for me personally, Prey is definitely just as good as that movie. Like, I kind of give Predator 2 a 3 out of 5. Maybe most people wouldn't give it that, but I don't think it's as bad as people have made it out to be, especially with kind of how, like, Predators is good, but feels more generic. Like, Predator 2 is maybe not, is like, it's a pretty solid movie, but it's also pretty weird. It's like kind of like Judge Dredd. Like, Judge Dredd's like a terrible movie, but like, there's something about the overall like aesthetic of it and design and weirdness. Like, there's a fun to some of those 90s movies in that way. And I don't know. Hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it definitely does make sense. Like I said, like, nostalgia is really tough to that plays a big part in like what I might pick over something else, like just the look and feel of that. Because like, say we want Predator 2, of course, Predator 2, like you said, obviously I'm sure was filmed in the late 80s, came out in 90. It just had that. I mean, growing up with that look and feel with movies like that was just, it's just really hard. It's hard. It's funny because a buddy of mine said to me, like, when he saw the Batman, and he loved the Batman, and he first said, he's like, honestly, it's so hard to like overcome like the nostalgia of Tim Burton's Batman, watching that growing up. Like, I think that'll always just be my favorite. But it was just like, God damn, was this movie so good though. Like, it was, I have to say, it's probably my favorite live action Batman. I'll watch Tim Burton's more, but this and that. And you can also say that with like, that's kind of like, even with this movie to a degree, like Predator 2 does have that nostalgia for me. Like, I can watch and enjoy it to a degree. But I think at the end of the day, like, this movie just did, too many things I was much more enamored by and intrigued by, and I was more fascinated by, that I would have to. I mean, this is an easy pick over Predator 2. But again, I still do have my enjoyment with Predator 2. I still do. Like, I can still watch it. I can still enjoy it. But just the quality of the first one, in addition to that look, feel, and nostalgia, I mean, forget it. Like, you just can't. Because that's why the first one was so great too. Because the first one, a lot of the stuff that they did in Prey, they did do. I mean, I still that final encounter with Schwarzenegger and the Predator was was really awesome because he did have to like kind of like okay, like this is what I'm dealing with now. Like I finally know what I'm dealing with. I have to be smarter. This is like, you know, this is warfare between me and this is, you know what I mean? And
he surveyed, he looked at what was going on.
Yep.
He made smart decisions, and he came out on top.
Yeah, he set traps. So it turned into like a very like, and I really appreciate that when movies do stuff like that. And like, I don't like when movies just like.
If I can interject, it feels like I don't like when movies do it and it doesn't feel earned.
That's
when
the thing.
It feels like it's out of nowhere. You're like, okay, well, it's cool, but it's like, what's the point of it if it wasn't like, you know, she came to that conclusion organically? You know what I mean? Like and it seems like all these situations in this movie, she came to all these solutions organically. Like, and that's the thing that makes it a satisfying watch. Is like you see her intelligently coming to these conclusions, not like, oh, I'm coming to this conclusion because it refers to the other movie, and that's why I need to come to that conclusion. It's full on like it was just a smart way for her to solve the problem, and it relates to the last movie. And so it's like it works perfectly. Like I feel like it just works very well together.
When you like look at the situation and you have to construct like a tactful plan. And that's one of the reasons I always loved like those old school like World War II like man on a mission movies like Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare, because the plan was a big part of those movies. Like there was an intricate plan. There was a step-by-step plan to like, you know, do this to escape. And that was a huge focus of it. And a lot of movies now, I mean, there was a ton of, whether it was Suicide Squad or Rogue One, it's like, oh, it's the Dirty Dozen, but with Star Wars. Oh, it's the Dirty Dozen, but with supervillains. And none of those movies ever did what made Dirty Dozen like those movies so great, and they never focused on like the action that you like the actual plan and like what kind of like methods you needed to use to, you know, to carry the narrative forward. And that was
way too forced, way too formulaic. It's just like we have these characters, you know, they're all going to come together and blah 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 blah. Like it's not. There's no like real tension to it because it's just so much the same formula. Where you know it's Oh yeah, go ahead.
No, you're no. I totally get that though, and it was funny because I was talking to my brother. And I made mention that, like, you know, the new Top Gun movie, just talking about Rogue One, about, you know, in that regard, I said the new Top Gun movie did something that I wish Rogue One did. My brother's like, what are you talking? Like, really? I'm like, yeah, because like, I don't know if you guys saw Top Gun yet, but like a big part of the new Top Gun, it did kind of harken back to those like old like World War II movies where there was a specific mission. But in order to like conduct that mission involved an elaborate, very nuanced, detailed plan that had to be done with like, you know, all these skilled pilots. It was like it was a huge focus instead of just like, oh, let's just show up and blow things up and we'll just have a cool CGI aerial fight. And it's like, no, that's not what it was. And then you look at Rogue One, it's like, well, how do we get past all the you know, the GAR or like the sensors or whatever? Well, just so happens I stole a ship and I think the old codes still work. Hopefully that's the case. You know what I mean? And it's just like,
everything works out perfectly. Wonderful.
Like everything works out. And like, yeah, there's a big battle at the end of Rogue One. And I liked Rogue One. I enjoyed Rogue One a lot. And the battle stuff was cool. But like, I always found so much more interesting in movies like that, where there was that very like kind of detailed step by step. I know that's kind of like going a little off track with Predator, but like, it's still kind of like does relate to the fact that there is a purpose behind the action and there is like a plan behind the action, and you see that plan like come to fruition. And it's not just, you know, explosions, or it's not just like fancy flips and you know, like this and that. Like, there was an actual like
bullshit.
You know, like, exactly, yeah. So
yeah, absolutely. I mean, any time that you can assign real meaning behind any kind of action on film, it's always going to be better. And it doesn't matter what the genre is. It doesn't matter what the story that you're telling. Like you have to really feel the weight of what's happening. And that's obviously what so much has been lost with overabundant CGI. If you're not using it as more of the garnish, like we always say, it's just it takes away from all of that. And there's so many movies now. Like, it is refreshing that a lot of the people making film now are people who are our age or a little bit older, who grew up on real practical effects and understand that you can't just have a giant CGI smorgasbord and expect everything to be great and it to look perfectly wonderful and fantastic. Like, so many people have just really kind of turned their noses up, not entirely, but a bit to CGI. Like, okay, yeah, it's fun, it's cool, but at the same time, like, the response, I haven't seen Top Gun, but the response to Top Gun's been phenomenal, because everyone's like, what do you mean these people actually flew this? They're like, people still do that to make a movie? Like, there's so many times I'll see on YouTube, just as an example, you watch certain reaction videos sometimes, and you get curious, oh, what do people think of one of my favorite movies? And there's so many times I'm watching something with an older movie, and people are like, oh my god, they built this, they made that, and well, how did they do this or that? It's it's just amazing that so much of that is I'm certainly realizing how old I'm getting, and just how so many people have grown up on nothing but that now.
And then you look at, that's why I find Dwayne Johnson's movies remarkably empty. He's a big hulking dude. He's primed to be an action star. All of his movies are mediocre concoctions of other action movies in front of a green screen the entire time. And those are all of his movies. Again, he has that physique. He has that kind of presence that Schwarzenegger had. But Schwarzenegger was making movies. I mean, still arguably to this day, Schwarzenegger was probably, as far as making American action movies, no one really made them like Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, he worked with legitimate directors. He worked with John McTiernan and Paul Verhoeven and Walter Hill and James Cameron. And those movies still hold up. Predator, Terminator, Total Recall. I mean, they still hold up. And you look at someone like Dwayne Johnson now, and it's he hasn't even come close to making.
That's a really fair point. That's not something I really ever thought of before either.
And he's considered one of the big action stars now. And yeah, he has the chops to be I guess a cool action star for his physique and everything. But all of his movies are empty CGI nonsense. I mean, they're the most popular movies that come out. But he's in front of a green screen all the time, and you know what I mean. So and I mean, people love it, I guess, but there is just such an emptiness to all that.
It's just different. It's a different thing, and when you can make something more practically, and you can blend CGI in more appropriately, it's just a very different feel. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And there's, watching recently, rewatching Poltergeist and showing it to my fiance for the first time. There's effects in that movie that, of course, by today's standards are dated, but it's interesting to look at some of those visual effects and be like, okay, so I see how they did this either with a matte painting or they did this by, some other, more quote unquote primitive means. But it's it's not that it's not outdated, and it's not that they can't do something different or even better with CGI today, but it's it still doesn't look 100% real. So it's the effects can be better, but it's in some ways it's kind of, it has become just a preference thing, because it's you still know it's fake. You're still watching a movie.
That's the
so
thing.
It's I don't know, the original Poltergeist, by today's standards, are you really going to have a major Hollywood blockbuster that's using real fucking bodies? No. I don't think so.
That's the thing. When you have those complete CGI backgrounds, and you can say oh, maybe this thing in Poltergeist doesn't hold up as much, but what about the movie in 2022 that is, it doesn't look like they're even on, it looks like they're on a set of just all blue walls and green walls or whatever. They just put.
Well, we've all said it 1,000 times. I mean, the Star Wars prequels, they don't hold up for that reason, and it's like, you know, there's a variety of things you can complain about with them, but at the end of the day, like, when you make the majority of it CGI, like, that's, of course, it's going to age terribly. Like, all the CGI that's, like, now, in 2022, in 5 years, what are we going to do? We're going to be looking back and going, wow, like, look how far CGI's come. I mean, I could say that now about movies from 2012. Like, the CGI then, like, looked pretty good. It certainly looked better than 2002, but, like... Yeah. At the same time, like, again, like, it's all about how you use it. I mean, I just appreciated the way that they shot this new Predator movie. There's so much of it that just the cinematography of the landscapes are just beautiful.
Oh, some of this, and I do want to point out, talking about CGI, like, it is worth mentioning too that some of the CGI in this new Predator movie is not fantastic. I mean, they were definitely...
Yes, that's true.
They were definitely not working with the biggest budget, but it wasn't like just... It wasn't scenes of actors clearly standing on a blue set. It was like, yes, the CGI animals, they didn't look... I mean, they weren't the best, a lot of them. But again, they weren't working with a big budget. But the CGI wasn't dictating the quality of the action sequences. Like, I was watching... just because I love all that stupid spy stuff, I watched that new Netflix movie, The Gray Man, with... okay. Ryan Gosling and Chris. I had stupid. It's a junky movie. It is a junky movie. There's some cool stuff in it. But there's a lot of those. Like, there's a scene in the beginning where this elaborate scene where Ryan Gosling falls into it. They're at a big hotel and there's fireworks going off everywhere. And he gets into this fight scene with this guy and they fall into this pit. And surrounded by the pit is all the fireworks going off. And they start incorporating, like, the fireworks in the fight a little bit. And the entire scene is so muddy and rubbery looking just so they can have an elaborate sequence like that. And it just doesn't look good. And that's the problem too, where they, like, it's like they conjure up these action sequences like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if they were like fireworks all over the place and they were fighting and he put his face into this firework that was going off. It's like, yeah, I guess that'd be cool. How are we going to do that? I got it set up already. Blue boxes, blue walls. We'll just have them fight on that whole thing and we'll do it all in post-production. And it just doesn't look good. And I have a problem when action movies have to... You know, they're like, it's like, we want to go so big. If you're going so big with a sequence that you have to make the entire thing CGI like that, it's not worth doing, in my opinion. Like, that does not make for a good action sequence when most of the action is being done in post-production. And I have no doubt that they worked in the fight a lot, but just the aesthetic of it was and they did the same thing with a plane sequence where the plane is ripping apart and they're fucking flying out of the plane and it's all CGI. And it's like, okay, this doesn't even look good, but it's a big sequence. Right. You know what I mean? Like, they had a couple of good moments, but like there was a lot of stuff like that. And that's a big problem with a lot of these movies where it's like, we got to go bigger, but to go bigger means a ton of CGI. So even though Prey didn't have the best CGI, it wasn't it wasn't used in the way that those movies are doing it. It was just like,
no, it was used very effectively with regards to those animal sequences, because it's like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do with a giant bear? Well, yeah, it's going to be way easier to have a CGI bear for all this, like, choreographed fighting. You know, it makes sense. You're going to have, like, it was also smart that they shot the the lion was all night shoots. So that was smart. And obviously that helps to cover some of that CGI stuff, you know. Mm-hmm. But
absolutely.
Yeah, it's just, I don't have a problem with it when it's like I've seen the new Jordan Peele movie, and there's a chimpanzee in part of that movie, and it's, you know, they use CGI to make that possible, and like it just makes sense. You know, the way that it's used, how it plays out, you know, blah blah blah. You're just like, yeah, it's way easier to not use a real animal and and just have something be created that like looks pretty damn good, But you might still be like, all right, it's like even all like the new Planet of the Apes movies, like each one of those movies, the effects just got better and better and better.
Much, yes.
And they are blended in certain sequences so seamlessly. Mm-hmm. But of course, even those movies are not perfect, and there's some scenes, especially with a lot of movement, where you're just like, okay, it's CGI, but it just depends on how it's used and how well it's done.
Yeah, if there's no sense of geography because you're just you're just on a set with like everything covered in blue, like it's just. You
have to stay grounded. You have to stay grounded, exactly. and I feel like Prey did a really good job of trying to reestablish a monster and a character that you already know. Because I kind of had like the same almost like thought towards the beginning, like, oh, we're seeing the Predator sort of get dropped off, and we're getting a glimpse, and I'm like, isn't this a little early? And then I'm like, well, no, like this is like the fifth Predator solo film. Yeah. Like, we can definitely see a cloaked Predator here. There's no reason that, we know what we're in for. Like, the original Predator is smart because it keeps him hidden for a long time. And there's this burn of, like, what is following them? And then when that thing is, like, getting revealed, you're like, oh, goddamn. This is just something I have never seen on film before.
Yeah.
And with this one, they obviously have to reinvent the wheel, and they do a pretty good job of dialing it back in a way that feels like it's very much tangible to those original movies, and it's a very difficult task, and it's been very difficult for, I think, a lot of these franchises that they brought back like this. Like Blair Witch 2016 just did not get a fair shake at all, but that movie was a great direct sequel to the original. I recently saw Shin Godzilla. Goddamn, like, you want to talk about like bringing a character back that is so overexposed, and there's been 25 fucking Godzilla movies. Like, that made Godzilla pretty damn scary again.
Okay.
So there's it's not my favorite Godzilla film, but like, it really did make that concept of that creature terrifying. And I mean, it should be terrifying. It's a giant lizard, but attacking the city. But it's really hard. It's really, really hard. And there's so many movies that have tried and failed miserably, like when they remade Nightmare on Elm Street. But like the recent Candyman that was done was really good. And compared to the original sequels for Candyman, like, it's so hard. And so I really appreciate Prey. I mean, it's the only other Predator movie I'd consider buying.
Yeah, no, I'm 100% with you. I enjoyed the movie a ton. I honestly look forward to watching it again. Like, I mean, I can, if I
sure,
sit down and watch it right now, honestly. So I
want to just end this conversation with you and just watch it right now.
I gotta go. I gotta watch.
Guys, it's already on.
All right. So yeah,
highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Very much. I very much enjoyed it.
Yeah, I feel like honestly, I'm in the same grouping. I really enjoyed it. I didn't expect to enjoy it as much as I did, but it really is very good. Like,
I think it has been a very. Oh, go ahead, Frank. Sorry.
No, I just said there were so many points in watching it. I'm like, all right, this is really good. Like, I just, overall, I really enjoyed it. I would recommend it to anyone who was a fan of the original Predator or any of the subsequent films, especially if you were a fan of the subsequent films. I'd be like, well, watch this because it's really fun. So
cool.
Totally. Totally. Well, make sure that you check out MitchoyChats.com for all the fun stuff that we do there, Mr. Frank Mitchell.
Well, get horny with it is what I say.
Get horny with it.
Then you do it, and you do it, and you do it well.
Hashtag do it well. For Mitchoy Chats, I'm Michael J. Foy.
You have always been Michael J. Foy, and I am Frank Mitchell.
I'm Mike DiGioia.
And Mike DiGioia has always been a scumbag. And this has been
scumbags.
And this has been Prey.